Okay, let's jump right in. Have you ever stopped to think if there's like a single source behind all the good stuff in life? You know, our best friendships, those moments of real insight, or even how we find hope when things get tough. Well, the source material we're looking at today puts forward this incredible idea that all of these things actually flow from one central concept, what it calls God's loving kindness.
So, before we get any further, what does this phrase even mean? The original uses a Korean word, inja Hashem. And it's not just about a passing feeling of affection. It's pointing to something way deeper, a foundational, unchanging love and mercy. Just think of it as the steady, central hub for everything else we're about to explore.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with that core idea, and then we'll see how it shows up in 4 totally different parts of our lives. In our relationships, in how we gain wisdom, how we deal with hardship, and even in why we give praise. And then, of course, we'll wrap it all up with the big takeaway. First up, relationships. How does a massive divine concept like this actually make its way into our everyday human connections? Well, the journey starts with the idea of a covenant. This line comes from that famous story of David and Jonathan. Now remember, Jonathan's own father, the king, is trying to kill David. But Jonathan makes this incredible promise. And notice, he doesn't just say, hey, I'll be a good friend to you. He specifically calls on the loving kindness of the Lord as the blueprint for their bond.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Jonathan's promise wasn't just about being loyal. It was him consciously deciding to mirror a divine quality in a human friendship. Their commitment wasn't based on feelings, which can change in a heartbeat, but on reflecting a love that by its very nature doesn't change. It's a pretty powerful way to think about our own commitments, right?
So if our relationships can actually be a reflection of this loving kindness, it kind of brings up a bigger question. How do we even see it or understand it in the first place? It seems like it takes more than just smarts. It requires a totally different kind of wisdom.
So here, the Apostle Paul draws a really clear line in the sand. He's suggesting that some truths, especially the deep core motivations of God, aren't things you can just figure out with logic alone. They have to be spiritually revealed.
And this comparison just lays it out so clearly. From a purely worldly point of view, an event like the cross seems like absolute foolishness, a total failure. But with what's being called God's wisdom, you can start to discern the incredible loving kindness and the deep purpose behind it. It's a huge shift from just knowing the facts to actually understanding the meaning.
Okay, this is where the rubber really meets the road. I mean, it's one thing to talk about love and kindness when life is good, but what about when you're in the middle of real suffering? Let's look at a moment of absolute devastation.
This is the cry from the people of Jerusalem right after their city has been completely destroyed. They've lost everything, and they know it's because of their own actions. But even then, in their plea, they're appealing to this idea of renewal, of restoration.
And this really gets at a question every single one of us faces at some point. When you've hit rock bottom, when it feels like all is lost, where do you even begin to look for hope? Is it even possible?
And here's the crucial point the source makes. Their hope wasn't just wishing for their situation to magically get better. No, it was anchored in their belief in the unchanging character of God. They were trusting that His capacity for loving kindness, for renewal, was bigger than their current disaster. The hope was in the restorer, not just in the restoration.
So we've seen this concept show up in our relationships, in our wisdom, and in our darkest times. This final section connects love and kindness to the most basic thing there is, life itself.
This passage from the Psalms? Wow. It doesn't just describe loving kindness as a nice quality, it elevates it to a whole other level. It's called precious. And then it's directly connected to the fountain of life.
And this is the ultimate expression of the whole idea. Loving kindness isn't just something God does. It's presented here as the very wellspring that our life, our light, all good things bubble up from. And when you see it that way, praise isn't just some religious duty. It becomes the most natural response to the simple fact that we exist at all. Okay, let's bring these 4 threads all back together and land on the main takeaway from this whole thing.
So we've looked at 4 really different parts of life. In our relationships, loving kindness becomes a model for a commitment that doesn't quit. In our understanding, it's a truth we need spiritual wisdom to really grasp. In our toughest moments, it's the foundation for our hope that things can be made new, and in our best moments, it's the reason we feel praise welling up inside.
And that brings us right back to the core argument. What we've seen is this unified idea that all these different parts of the human experience, the good, the hard, the beautiful, they're not just random, separate things.
Instead, they are all expressions that flow from a single, constant, life-giving source.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If the source of our deepest friendships, our best insights, our toughest hopes, and even our own breath, if that source is singular and unchanging, how might that completely change the way we see the world and our place in it?